Hello, you're very welcome, and this is the Michael Harding podcast on a Sunday morning, reading from What is Beautiful in the Sky. And this is the third reading from it that I've done over this weekend as a little bit of a party for St. Swithin's Day. It's summer begins. This is from page 14. I suppose if I never wrote another word, the person I would really miss writing about would be the General. It's a long time ago that I first drowned the shamrock with him in a Mullingar hotel in 2006, after I first arrived in Westmeath. It had been a time of great expectations. I was newly arrived in Mullingar and had begun writing a column in the Irish Times about ordinary life in the town. I felt it might be on the verge of great achievements. I mentioned to the General that I intended climbing the Reek that year. "Be careful about that," he said. He said I shall wear climbing boots so I don't sprain an ankle. He said, "It's not the ankles you need to worry about, it's the wind." I said, "You can't avoid wind if you're on a mountain." He said, "You're not getting my point. Mountain climbing is a useless and unnecessary exercise, and excessive exercise is widely recognized as a cause of flatulence." He should know. He breaks wind like an officer's horse, and usually excuses it by saying, "I'm becoming more like Dr. Swift by the day." As if his wind was as bracing a comment on modern society as one of Jonathan Swift's pamphlets might have been about the world he lived in. When a man exercises, he shakes up his innards, and the intestines are left like a leaking balloon, so beware of the mountain. We were sitting in the foyer. Green shamrocks had been painted on the windows. The receptionist wore a leprechaun hat, and the foyer was full of children in green uniforms. The General finished his 6th pint of Guinness and belched pleasantly. "And avoid cabbage," he declared, "at all costs. Bacon and cabbage are consumed by the Irish in unnatural quantities, but people don't realize that cabbage can do to the stomach what a lighted match does to a tank of petrol. I used to feed it to the horses years ago when I lived in Hampshire, the night before a hunt, to make them jump higher." "You may be correct about the cabbage," I conceded, "but nobody could accept that climbing a mountain is a cause of flatulence." "My good man," he said, "when I was meditating in India, I always did yoga stretches before sitting. Then, when I began the meditation, I often experienced methane bursting from various orifices. My guru explained that this initial period in the meditation session is known as the settling of the winds. But I was only doing yoga. Consider what you would be like after climbing the Reek." The General's massive eyebrows lifted, and he stared at me with great intensity. Then, looking towards the bar, he bellowed, "Bartender, 2 more pints of your finest stout, please." There was a tall woman sitting on a nearby sofa, wrapped in a fur coat, and sipping from a long glass of something green through a straw. She was listening to the General with attention. "Those hippie families in the West," the General said, give their children nothing but lentils, and when the poor creatures go to school, everybody laughs at them. The woman on the sofa rose. Clearly she had heard enough. She approached us, and I dreaded what she might say. I kept chickens, the General continued, when I lived in Kilkenny. I would cook one occasionally in a pot and make a hot curry, and by jingo, if there was curry left over, I fed it back to the other ones in the yard, and they lapped it up. I said, that's disgusting. Ah, yes, he said, but they laid wonderfully spicy eggs. Forgive me for interrupting, the lady said, her eyes on the General, but I believe we knew each other when you lived in Kilkenny. The General's face brightened. Delia, he exclaimed with great excitement, and he stood to embrace her. And just then, and without the slightest embarrassment, he broke enough wind to sail an armada. Oh, don't mind me, it's only the Guinness, he declared, as 2 more pints arrived on a tray with little shamrocks imprinted on their creamy heads. And so there I was. Early in the morning, 6 a.m., June of 2020, and I'm thinking about the General at that hour, and all of a sudden the phone actually rang. And I smiled to see that it was the General. When I answered, I heard him breathing with difficulty. For a moment I wondered, had he caught the disease? You're up early, I said. Are you okay? Just tired, he said. That's all, I can't sleep. And I'm fucking fed up with this. We have to get out tomorrow from the lockdown. We must meet. What say you to lunch in Mullingar? I smiled. We can't, I said. Tomorrow there are things opening, but not everything. And there's no travel allowed yet between our regions. So no matter what opens tomorrow, you're stuck in Mullingar and I'm still stuck in Leitrim. Fuck that, he whispered. I thought it was over tomorrow. After a few other pleasantries, he hung up, and the fire log burst into flame in my stove, and the 4 briquettes I mounted on top of it reddened the stove. There's nothing I love more than going to my study very early in summer, when it's still chilly from the clear night, and lighting a token fire in the stove. It's a kind of ritual, like lighting candles before a service. On the eastern wall of the room is my father's bookcase, in which I house my icons. The Christ of Sinai icon from Belarus, the Madonna of Kazan from Warsaw, the column Kill, also from Belarus. These are hand-painted works of art by masters of the craft. The shelves are also replete with other images and icons of lesser significance, as they are merely reproductions of originals. Saint Xenia of Petersburg, Rubliev's Holy Trinity, Christ the Bridegroom, and a rare Russian icon of Sophia, the Wisdom of God. And on my writing desk is a photograph of my wife. Sitting on the top of the writing bureau is a woofer for my Samsung soundbar, and on top of that is a golden Buddha, which I brought home from a Tibetan monastery near Mongod in India. Above that hangs a painting of the Buddha Manjushri, and a photograph of the learned Tibetan Lama who lives in West Cavan, the Reverend Panchen Utral Rinpoche. If I could add something Islamic, that might allow me to open my heart in that direction, I would have it, but so far I have not met the proper teacher to advise me. And for me, religious objects are useful tools rather than ornaments. No doubt someone might enter the room and be horrified by such an opulence of religiosity and such an overdose of deities from diverse religious traditions, all sitting down with each other in the one space. But on the other hand, you might come into my study and find none of these icons or objects on the walls at all, because very often I gather them reverently into boxes and hide them away in a press, or mask the glass doors of my father's bookcase with blue silk curtains to shield the icons from the world. And I do this when my faith has diminished, as it often does, and in complete devastation I just stare at the empty walls and view my faith with no more hope or optimism than a character in a play by Samuel Beckett. But when my hope and faith in metaphors returns, I take them out and scatter them once again, like flowers in springtime, on the walls and on the many shelves. They appear and disappear, as my faith ebbs and flows, and they reflect, I suppose, the nature of faith. It's not something that I can ever hold or make secure. It's not founded on any presumption of what is truth, but it comes and goes like the Atlantic tide on the long white beach of Carrickfinn in Donegal. It struck me as I reflected on the phone call that perhaps the General was close to giving up the ghost. I felt that the abrasive comedy and scatological fire which fueled him in the past was gone. He had sounded utterly dejected on the phone. Another 2 months of this confinement would be unbearable for him. Perhaps I should phone him back, assure him that August will come, that they will find a vaccine, that we will get through it together someday, and that if he could master Zoom and get his Wi-Fi sorted, then we might be able to have a laugh or indeed a drink some evening online when I knew he was capable of, without the staff at the nursing home knowing what he was doing. But that would not convince him. When despair takes root in an old man's heart, there is no rational remedy. Not even COVID-19 is as malignant as despair, and nothing is as susceptible to disease as an unloved heart. What the General utterly required was an embrace from a grandchild or partner or just a decent friend. But he was bereft of them all, and there was nothing I could do to soften that fact by any pep talk on the phone. He would see through it and be further wounded by my condescension. So I didn't phone him back.